Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Software Development and Architecture Podcast. This is a non-technical podcast, and it's also the topic itself is going to be a little bit different or quite a bit different from most of our podcasts. I don't know if I've arrived at a topic yet, but I guess we'll arrive at one. We'll have this monologue, and I'm sure we can arrive at a nice topic title at the end of this monologue. So, what I want to talk about today, in this podcast, is uh, how each of us represents not just ourselves but a larger population. And let me explain what I mean by this. Let's take an example. During this monologue, I'm going to take myself as an example, but you can extrapolate that to yourself or people you know to the extent that it makes sense to you. But here's the gist of it. When you look for work, right, apply for a job, I'm not talking a career, just keep it simple, just a job. You are representing yourself. Krish is saying, hey, this is what I've done in the past. This is what I'm currently working on. This is what I can help you with, right? So I'm presenting myself. I'm representing myself when I'm applying for a certain position. That's, but that's not all of it, right? That's not all. That's just the starting point, if you will. You are actually implicitly or even explicitly sometimes representing a larger population. You're representing people who look like you, who talk like you, and probably come from the same part of the world that you come from. Now, before you think I'm going to, I'm not saying folks are going to stereotype. Nobody wants to do that, right? We try not to. But I think it's human nature that you're going to draw conclusions and parallels if there are things that you think are common between people who have almost nothing to do with each other, but they have certain commonalities, and it's not even intentional, right? It's implicit, if you will, and I hope you agree. It's not with the intent of actually stereotyping anybody or a community, certainly not. But we do think, hey, if Krish says X, Y, and Z, if another person is around the same age group, demographic as Krish, and doing the same type of work, might have few things in common, and it's not because you're stereotyping the two people or the whole community, but it's because it's I don't know, it's reasonable, I think, to start there, even if it's not the perfect way to be. I think it's just we are all humans, right? We make mistakes and fix ourselves. And if you agree with that premise, maybe you can watch the rest of this video. If you don't, that's all right. We don't always have to agree with each other. If you think that's not the case at all, if you don't ever draw conclusions on those factors, then I respect you. The rest of the podcast may not make sense, right? But you're welcome to continue watching. But for everyone else who thinks there is that is possible, you let me know. I'm going to keep going, and you can tell me what you think. Here's the premise, right? So, Snowball's a product company. We have several products, but I'm not going to go into the details of that here. You can look up our links and go to our website to learn more about us. But we also do consulting, right? Managed services. And I've noticed that, we've done this, as part of keeping the lights on and doing everything we need to do for Snowpal. One part of what we do is managed services. Even though that's not the core part of a business, but that's something we do as well. And when we do that, I've seen that, over the years ago, let me take an example. I would hop on a call, I would have a conversation maybe with the recruiter, maybe with the dev manager, maybe with the director. They're like, hey, this is the kind of help I need. Can you help us with this? We have a conversation. Some of it is technical, some of it is not. And then we get started essentially, right? And we get the job done. If you don't know the work we've done, you can certainly look up our company, our testimonials and reviews and recommendations. I'm not going to go into those details here, but you can take my word for it if you want, or you can look it up, right? We've completed everything we've actually signed up for. But things were reasonably straightforward to hop on a project, get start the engagement and get the job done. That changed over the years. Many years ago, the interviews got a little bit lengthier. There were multiple rounds of interviews, like maybe two, and then years went by, it became two, became 3 or 4 rounds, and then there was live coding sessions, and it became more and more complex, complicated, and very, for lack of a better word, even tricky sometimes, right? Um, Even not for long-term employment, right? I'm not talking W2 where you're actually going to be working for a company for lengthy periods of time. I'm talking like contracting, consulting engagements that are 12 months, maybe 6 months or shorter. Because then sometimes people hit us up and say, "Hey, I have money saved up. Can you help me build this solution?" Right? We take up those kinds of projects as well. Uh, but again, regardless of the length of the project, uh, we've noticed that there were several rounds of interviews, and also as I learned, try to understand more about this, like what changed over the years. Sure, there is more of us in terms of population. There's fewer jobs. AI is showing up. That's understandable. But outside of all of that, I noticed that there was some fundamental shift in the notion in trust, if you will, right? There was a sense of skepticism, and it kind of intrigued me. I mean, nothing changed on my front, on our front at least at Snowpal, but then people were asking more questions during the process. And then as I try to we try to build a relationship with the client, with the employer, with the recruitment company, with the internal or external recruiters, and I know a lot of them reasonably even at a personal level. And when people tell you off camera, they share some experiences, and that sort of got me concerned because these things became harder over the years, not because of anything that changed on our end, but it's because things changed at a more macro level, right? At a macro, still at a, I don't know if I should say community, make of it what you will. I'm saying it to the best of my abilities here. You're going to have to draw some conclusions, right? So there was some judgments made because certain people did certain things that were not particularly what was expected, right? And that actually made life a little bit more difficult for other people who may have had some or a bunch of things in common with the people who actually did those things, whatever that means, right? That's why I want to do this podcast, to say that, as much as we as a society do not intend to or try not to stereotype, sometimes there is this in the subconscious, we actually might make those judgments. Uh, and I'm not saying whether we should, I think we should do our best not to have those, but I'm not talking to the people who might have, because, might come to those conclusions. This podcast is about what we can do as people to actually help other people not actually stereotype us as people, whoever you are as population, whatever it is that you do as a job, as a career. So it was long-winded. It's taken me 7 minutes to get to this point because brevity is not my forte. But if you're still here with me, if you're not, it's not your fault, it's mine. Should have gotten to this like 5 minutes ago. You can continue watching. I want to talk about things that we can do as individuals to actually make it easier for the rest of us, essentially, right? I have a bunch of points here. I'm going to go through one after the other. So it's minute 8. I'm going to tag and mention that in the post so that way you can skip the first 8 minutes of ramble, if you will, and get to the 8th minute where I can hopefully start talking something of substance. Uh, Credibility, right? When people ask me what's your biggest skill as an individual or as a company, I always say credibility more than anything that's engineering related, because it's hard to find good engineers and good engineering teams. I understand and I agree, but it's even harder to find good engineers who are credible, because it just makes it harder and harder, and we take pride in that fact. And I think I recommend to everybody that just be brutally honest and candid about what you do know and what you do not know. Everything that you say, it should be the truth and nothing but the truth, right? If you don't embellish what you do. Again, this is my 2 cents, my recommendation. I'm sure you can do what makes sense to you. This is what we do, and this is what I would recommend as somebody who's done this for over 2 decades. Your resume should speak the truth of what you've actually done for what people have actually paid you to do. Or if somebody's not paid you because it's open source or whatnot, you have something to prove. It's in production. It's either open source. If it's not open source, you have a version of it. Like the code, you may not be able to share the code, but you can share perhaps hopefully some reflection of it if it's again in the public domain. If it's not, then you cannot, right? And if it's not, you don't own the IP, you certainly cannot unless it's in the public domain. But whatever it is that you can share, just be able to share public repos, be credible about what it is that you do. Your resume should only call out for those things that you've done, that you've been paid to do, or you've done something that you can prove that you actually done. Outside of that, if you bought a book to learn about, I don't know, generative AI and spend like a week on it or a few days on it, I'm not sure if it show up on your resume because you've just read some things, right? Read articles. I think maybe you should call out for it in a separate section on your resume saying, hey, I've read these books, but that does not mean that's experience, right? Those are completely two different things. Where you're located. I think there's, you know, I've been doing remote work for a long time. We live in the suburbs of DC, but I've been doing remote work for lengthy periods of time. When people ask me, I tell them exactly where I live. Because, you could say if it's in a remote position, how does it matter? Maybe it does. Maybe the client wants to know the time zones. Maybe you have to get there once a month or something along those lines. So they might need to know where you're located. I think it's fair for them to ask you. So you need to be very clear about where you're located, right? I don't know why there's a reason to hide any of that stuff. Your availability. Are you working with multiple clients? If you're a consultant, what is your engagement going to look like? Do you have other interests? You can and you should, I think. I highly encourage people to have other interests because that's how you build your skills. But you need to be pretty clear when you communicate that to your potential employer. So make all of this clear. So there's absolutely no ambiguity, right? That's the first thing. And credibility is again key because I've had folks tell me there are people doing things that are sometimes, it's scarily not just not credible, but it freaks me out, to be very honest with you. And when somebody does that and they end up looking a little bit like you or come from the part of the world you might come from, I wouldn't blame the other party if they actually end up being influenced by it and being a little bit skeptical, saying, oh my god, does Krish actually live in DC? Has he really done what he claims to have done over the last 2 decades, right? So I think it's important that we set that standard, set that bar high enough so we help not just ourselves but everybody else who actually might have similarities with us. So the second point is professionalism. Are you as competent as you've presented yourself to be on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile, on everywhere else you've published, whatever it is you've done? It's one thing to say you've done 200 things or 20 things, whatever that number is, and whatever it is that you're doing. But it's yet another to be proficient in whatever it is that you've claimed to have done. What is your level of competence, right? Again, I'm not saying rate yourself 1 to 10 because I think that's preposterous. It's very hard. And people ask me, I throw out a number like 6 because I'm not terrible at that, but I'm certainly not anywhere close to an expert, right? Unless you've written, not just books, but you've created beautiful representations of whatever it is that technology is that you can prove, and you feel confident at that level, and you've done something dramatically unique. I don't think you're anywhere close to an 8 or a 9 or a 10, right? So be reasonable in how you rate yourself. Second point is professionalism. Third is communication. Now again, language, and depending on which part of the world you're located and what you're working on, what the native language is, there needs to be a core language, whatever that core language is. It doesn't have to be English. It certainly is not English in many parts of the world. I'm just going to speak to it as a non-native English speaker living in the US, being born and raised in India, where my native tongue is Tamil, but all of I know worked back in India. I was like really young when I came to the US, but all of my education was in English. It is for a fair number of us who grew up in that part of the world. Yet, when you think certain things, you think in certain languages, and then you translate that internally. So, regardless, I think for what I do, if I did not, I hope to lose more of my accent as I learn more and improve my vocabulary and all of those things, right? Sure, I love English as a language as much as I love Tamil, which is my native tongue. But I constantly try to improve. But you might be living in a different part of the world where a different language is your primary language. That's fine. But make sure you're good in terms of written and verbal and communication, verbal and written skills in that language. I think you have to make an effort to constantly improve. Now, let's say I'm a developer, I'm writing code. The argument could be how important is language, right? Well, I think it is important. I'll be honest with you. Because when you're writing code comments or you're writing documentation around your code, if you don't have somebody else do it explicitly, you're going to have to make sure you write it well enough so other people understand it. Now that you have lots of tools available, Grammarly and OpenAI and ChatGPT and whatnot, things have become even easier. That's awesome. So take advantage of it. You may or may not have to know the language as much as you may have had to know it in the past. That's fine, but it is important, right? Communication skills are important. I cannot stress that anymore. Now, point number 4: commitment to your deliverables, right? There's a saying that says, fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me. I would say, miss your deadline once, shame on you; miss it twice, shame on me, right? It's exaggerated, but hopefully you get the idea here. Commit to what you can deliver. If you cannot, just don't commit. I mean, things always change. I'm not saying it's an etched in stone, but be clear in your communication with your client, with your employer, with your stakeholders, whoever they are. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. I recommend that you underpromise and overdeliver, right? Because I think it's important. Because imagine if 10 Krishes who look like me, again one more time, who speak like me, or come from the part of the world I come from, miss deadlines, and you hire them one after the other. Uh, can someone blame you if you start building that stereotype, even if you didn't have one to begin with? I wouldn't blame you. So I think it's important. Again, one more time, right? We represent not just ourselves; we represent the population, that a larger population essentially, and it's our duty, I think, towards our larger population that we present, put our best foot forward. So and I think it makes a dramatic difference, right? Which is why I think you've got to say that, as people, we build a reputation not just for ourselves but for everybody around us. I cannot stress that anymore, actually. So do not miss deadlines as much as you can, right? And it's a lot of these points are sure applicable to everybody. But the idea is, I'm speaking to it with one or two thoughts in mind, which is, if every time somebody hires me, I blow it out of the park, the next time the client is actually, or the employer is actually interviewing somebody else who has certain commonalities and design patterns, if you will, with me and our company, I think they're going to go with a more positive attitude, right? With more trust to begin with. And I think that would be the biggest favor you would be doing to people such as yourself. And we take that very personally, right? And professionally, because we want to do the best we can, not just to help us, to help other people who could potentially benefit from our good, from the client's good experience with us, if you will. Point number 5, I've kind of said it already. Reputation is at stake, not just yours, but sadly, fortunately or unfortunately, for everyone that actually has commonalities with you. So remember that. You represent a lot more people than yourself. Number 6, learn the paradigms of the organization that you're actually going to be working with, either in the short term or the long term, because your learnings from the previous organizations will help you, but not as directly as you might think, because each organization and each team has its own culture. You've got to learn, because I've early years in my career, I used to have certain learnings from a certain organization, say a big product company. I'll take that to a small product company, and I've seen that it actually does not translate. That even with the fact that 99.999% of the people I've worked with, clients, folks, employers, and clients, have been located in the U.S. Right? Few of them have been in Europe, for the most part U.S. Even with that geographical difference not being there, there is still the paradigms, the cultures. West Coast works quite differently from the East Coast, right? Than it does from, say, Austin and other parts of Texas. There are some differences, some subtle, some not so subtle. So you take the time to learn the paradigms of that team and that organization before, to the extent possible. Number 7, shed your fears as much as you can and be confident, right? Nobody's doing anyone a favor. Your employer needs your help as much as you need that job. Sure, sometimes it's an employer's market. There's a lot of people available. There's less work to do. All said and done, if you're good at what you do, you should not have those fears and have that confidence. Because be grateful for everything you have, but that certainly doesn't mean you have a subservient attitude, right? That doesn't help because the client isn't paying you. Trust me, for you to listen to everything that they tell you. They're actually paying you to get the most value out of their spend, and the only way they can get that value is you being yourself and giving your best and proving how unique you are. So being subservient is actually not helpful, right? So I don't know why anyone would want to be that way. Number eight, help people around you who actually do not directly, who you do not directly benefit from. This goes a long way in folks respecting others. It's not just important, it's not important to take credit for everything that we do, right? Now, we don't have to be like the Gandhis or the MLK juniors to do good to society. If you can be to that extent, more power to you, right? But even if you cannot, uh, helping others in your team and your company and expecting no gain out of it whatsoever, no credit, no formal acknowledgement, actually goes a long way. This I assure you. It helps in many ways. One, you do that with nothing, not expecting anything in return, but you might actually get something back in return, maybe months or years down the road, when that person ends up going to a different company or they're in the same company and they reach out to you for you to help them with something. But other times, you've actually, increased, the reputation of, again, the people that might look or behave or talk like you. They'll be like, hey, you know what? I have now a positive attitude towards somebody who has an accent like Krish has, right? Forget everything else. If every single time I picked up a project, which I think I can tell you we've done that at our company, you've made a good impression on your client and been honest to whatever it is that you've done, then the next time they talk to somebody who has the same strong Indian accent that Krish has, they're going to have a more positive attitude. And I think that's, it didn't benefit you, but you've actually helped, other people, which is awesome, right? And it doesn't have to be people who look like you, people who talk like you. I'm saying, if you set a good foundation as a developer, as an engineer, as an architect, the next time a business client is going to hire an architect or engineer, they're going to have a positive attitude towards that engineer and that architect because they've had good experiences with a different architect and an engineer and a product manager in the past. So well, I've said a lot about similarities. The similarities go beyond just a demographics, a lot beyond that, right? It goes to your profession, the type of work you do, the nature of business you're in, all of that, right? So you're going to help other people who have similar interests to you. Number nine, react to transitions gracefully. And what I mean by transitions here specifically is restructurings. Now, restructurings happen, uh, layoffs happen. We don't control. It's just how capitalism works, right? I mean, we cannot control the micro and the macroeconomics. So when such a thing happens, and if you happen to be in a position where somebody hands out a pink slip to you, hope that doesn't happen, but it's okay. Do not spoil all the good reputation you've built up until that point by reacting in what should I say? Can I use the word bizarre here? Because I've actually seen people reacting in very peculiar manners. Now, sure, you're going to be upset. It's very understandable. Everyone needs a job. We need jobs to pay our bills. We need money. But by reacting in a not so professional manner at the time such a thing happened to you, you're actually not helping yourself or anybody, right? Actually going to be detrimental to your career. So don't put your employer in a position where they'll never want to rehire you again. Be professional. Understand that it's nothing personal. Hopefully it isn't. And I know 99% of the time it is not going to be. It's just that things have changed. They are mostly, say, a profit organization. They need to worry about their stakeholders. They need to worry about the quarter, the results, the earnings, and whatnot. So they have to do what they have to do. But you be thankful for the learnings you've had from the company, from the team, from the person who's doing that. Take that learning and put that to better use in your next company, in your next project. Maybe you're becoming independent, maybe you're becoming an entrepreneur, so you can put that use directly for yourself. So present yourself very well, even at that point, and very and particularly at that point of time, and if you do actually get laid off or something. Um, Number 10, a job is surely important for all of us, right? For most of us, we need to pay our bills. But remember that it does not define you, right? In a good market, even with limited skills, you may get paid a lot of money. In a bad market, even with great skills, you may actually be unemployed. So again, most of us are not in a position to control the macro and the micro environment. So while it's imperative that you feel good about yourself when things are actually going well, I mean, don't be like braggadocious, right? That you certainly don't want to be. And when things aren't going so well, don't be too hard on yourself. It's easier said than done. I promise you that it's not as easy as it might sound. But remember, you have to tell yourself that this too shall pass, right? Um, Good things and great things are just around the corner. Just pull yourself through. Take the opportunity to learn something else. Do something you've not had the opportunity to do. Maybe help someone else out. Maybe do some teaching. Explore a bunch of different things. Whatever it is that keeps you going. Trying to be positive, right? Now they say idle mind is a devil's workshop, so you want to keep yourself busy. But I've also read, a recent quote which I want to do a podcast on, which was actually brilliantly written. I don't know who the person is. I've actually quoted that in a multiple podcasts. I think it said, hopefully I do justice to paraphrasing it or quoting it if I do it accurately. So, boredom is to the mind as sleep is to the body. So you have to draw a balance between not having an idle mind so it doesn't become a devil's workshop, and not ever encouraging boredom, because apparently that's good for our minds. So hopefully some of this makes sense to you, even if not all of it. But the point, to wrap up this podcast, I want to say that we do represent other people. I mean, hopefully you agree. If you don't, I cannot convince anyone, and that's not my intent. But this is my experience, at least for the people who agree with that idea, the thought process, which is anything that we do, we represent a larger population. So the good that we do is going to make a difference, and if we don't do such great things, it's going to hurt other people, even if they didn't do those mistakes. So I think do everything in your capacity to, again, do a really really quick recap of a list of things, right? Stating the obvious, but hopefully it makes sense. Credibility: only say what you've done, what you can do. Don't embellish your profiles and resumes. I think you're unique, you're good, and you can find work for what you know, and for what you don't know, you're going to learn and improve. Be professional, have clear communication, improve your communication skills, be committed to your deliverables. If you cannot do it, don't promise. Remember that reputation, not just yours, but a larger population that you represent, that their reputation is at stake by your actions as well. Learn the paradigms of the organization you're working for and the team, and then make adjustments so you can gel well and fit well into that team and be productive. Shed fear, do not be subservient, be confident. Help people around you, even those who you do not directly benefit from. React to transitions gracefully. A job is important. Last but not least, a job is important, but it certainly does not define you as a person. That's it for this podcast. The next one is going to be a very different podcast. It's going to be about tools that you would use as a digital analyst. I can't wait to do that, because I'm not a digital analyst myself, but I actually want to explore some of those tools. Talk to you soon. Check out our products on go to snowpal.com, and go to products.snowpal.com. Check out a number of our products, including our SaaS API products, and just be more productive as an engineering organization. Thanks, and talk to you soon. Bye bye.